Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Is It a Real Classic, a podcast about movies and TV shows, where a bunch of well-versed folks come together and answer that age-old movie debate about what makes a classic. I am your host, Litz Nicholas. With me today is Mr. John McJared. Say hello.
Hello.
Cobra Kai KP.
Sweep the leg.
And Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Aye.
You know, I give you this whole long name, and you just mutter out a hi.
The energy, brother.
I hate snakes.
Say yeah, or if you want, we can go back to Ratatouille and you can complain about it again.
No. I hate snakes.
There we go. All right, I like that. Snakes. I like that strained energy. That strained energy gives me life. All right. So today we're going to be talking about another John Carpenter film, which is John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness, one of his lesser-known movies. For those of you who do not know, In the Mouth of Madness follows an insurance investigator, John Trent, as he looks for a missing horror novelist named Sutter Kane. While he does so, he finds himself getting sucked into the writer's work as the world around him seems to fall into the mouth of madness. That is a very condensed version of what the movie's about, but I said that as to avoid spoilers, which we'll be going into, so why did I... Anyway, what were our thoughts on the movie? Because this is Jared and I, we've seen it already. KP, this is your... I don't know if you've seen this, like, not in a while if you have, but... What were your thoughts?
I think I had seen it earlier when it came out, but, I mean, that's a lot of movies ago. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Sometimes
I'm lost. I'm kind of old and kind of intake a lot of content, so it was like watching it for the first time. Yeah. Little flashbacks of I remember that part or whatever. Like I didn't know how it was going to end. I didn't, you know what I mean? That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yup. Well, Jared, as you know, we like it. So.
Oh yeah, gosh, it's perfect in so many ways for me. The acting, just the general overall vibe of it. Oh, mm-hmm. Dude, I just love the practical effects too.
Ooh,
I'm a sucker. I'm a sucker for them.
All right, so let's get jumping into it. Now, this story is beyond meta. Like we've discussed meta movies before, but I think this is the most meta. Like, New Nightmare comes close, but it's a movie of a dude trying to track down an author who it turns out is writing the world that he is currently in, but not really. It's a lot. Like, it starts off where you're thinking, like, okay, this guy's trying to track down this, like, J.K., like, it's supposed to be a very blatantly Lovecraft meets J.K. Rowling or Stephen King, where it's like this very popular cult-like figure in the world of writing and horror that has just gone missing. They're trying to look for him, and then they find out that the place that he wrote about is real. And then as he goes around into this very strange place, it turns out that it's a part of a larger story, which is a part of trying to create a religion as to release the elder gods. It is a lot. So I guess I'm going to ask for your thoughts on that, because it is, once again, a lot.
I think it's a super interesting take on, like, the whole Lovecraftian gods. Mm-hmm. The kind of, abominable, unholy, indescribable nature of gods. I love that stuff. I'm a huge fan of that genre. I think it's an interesting take to have them be kind of using an author to write themselves into the world is just awesome to me. I love that, just the meta nature of it, that, and the questions it poses, where it's like, well, did the gods exist before this dude, or did this dude really actually, because of people's belief, was he able to create them through his fiction?
Yeah, and we'll talk about what that entails in a bit, because that actually opens up a really fascinating aspect about this whole movie and what it's talking about.
Can I pose a quick question?
Go ahead.
If this movie were to be remade, how would you infiltrate a global mindset? Like he did it through books in this. The gods did it through books in this. How would they do that now? Like what medium form would be able to accomplish such a thing? Would it be a podcast? Would it be
May I introduce
Disney
you to the
Disney.
MCU?
Yeah, I was about to say Disney would make them
to Star Wars.
okay. Yeah, that would be perfect, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's
have a series of films set in the same universe.
And then it creates the Elder Gods, and then there are a bunch of sequels, and then the more sequels there are, the more people start to believe that it's real, and like
so it's the Avengers.
It's the Avengers, it's Star Wars, it's whatever, it's the DC, it's whatever franchise you want to be, which is kind of what I find interesting about this movie now, which is the meaning behind the meta nature of it. And I can go into it now, might as well.
Oh.
Because what I took away from it, like when I saw it recently, was the fact that it is a very pointed, unintentionally pointed statement on rabid fandoms. How like this piece of work can literally just become a religion that drives people to extremes. Like it creates a cult of personality not only around the author but around the work itself. Like if you want any evidence, I will easily point you in the direction of Star Wars or the Snyder Cut nonsense.
The international, the wrestling community.
The wrestling community is another perfect example of it, where it
just, every community has a group, right?
Yeah, where you, like it starts as a fandom thing, and it starts like it gives people like togetherness, makes people feel like they have a group with like a common thing to talk about, which is a good thing. But then, like if whatever it is, like it becomes this religious aspect, it can drive people to these extreme aspects where they can't separate reality from fiction, where also they can't seem to like they will do anything to preserve the work. One of the most terrifying aspects, terrifying aspects but fun aspects of the beginning of the movie is where the editors, like you see John talking to somebody about Sutter Kane, and then this dude with an axe bursts through the window and just asks him, "Have you read Sutter Kane?" before he almost kills him. And the way that kind of sounds a bit similar to the way like you'll go to a con and someone will kind of glomp on you and say, "Have you heard of Homestuck?" And it's just, oh no. It takes a whole other meaning and context if you look at it from that point of view and angle. But that's what I
like
took it away.
No sir.
Yeah, it's not only no sir, but also anyway, KP, you were saying?
Even little things like, you know how Justin always says nobody hates metal fans like metal fans?
Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing too. You know, you immediately pass judgment on people, even in your own genre, even in your own likes of certain genres based on, you know, what they like inside of it. We managed to create tribes inside of tribes inside of tribes. You know what I mean? It's kind of crazy what we've turned into.
Yeah. It is what In the Mouth of Madness is able to tap into as well is the fact that not only does this push you to extremes, not only is there a religious aspect, but the fact of the matter is that it happens so innocuously and yet so obviously that you kind of accept it as being normal at a point. Like the whole and the cruelties that would like normally be like that no one would possibly do that becomes normalized. I've pointed out, I mentioned earlier a little bit, but the stuff regarding the Snyder Cut, where we've had these people bombard people like WB executives and like not only executive but just people who work at Warner Brothers demanding for the Snyder Cut, and people where they've sent hate messages and death threats to an extent simply to get a version of the movie that may or may not exist, which judging by recent things turns out it never existed, and now they're just trying to reshoot it again. That's a whole other discussion. But also, if you want to throw it over to Star Wars with the repercussions of The Last Jedi, like it or not, the movie got such a polarizing opinion from fans. People were sending death threats and hate messages to Kelly Marie Tran, who played a character in a Star Wars movie, telling her that she, the actress, ruined the movie and that she is the person. And they started sending, again, death threats, hate messages to this actual person. And if you want to throw it over to like talking about the author and their responsibilities, J.K. Rowling has very recently done a lot of very has said a lot of transphobic statements and has doubled down on them. And while some people have kind of stepped away from J.K. Rowling because of it, some people have backed her to the hilt because she wrote Harry Potter. They're willing to back
Yeah,
up these
and
transphobic statements because she made this thing that's so part of their childhoods.
that's like the religious aspect of it, where it doesn't just become a piece of media, but it's almost a facet of their personality, and it becomes ingrained to defend, quote, defend that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Even in cases where it's like, dog, she sucks. Even in cases where it's like, you can still like whatever you like, but like she sucks, but you don't have to defend her like she's a religious figure speaking truth. You know what I mean?
People are allowed to be flawed.
Yeah, and it's like it's way more complicated, but people do just fall into tribalism so easily.
Yeah,
I do it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we could
I
also.
Yeah, I mean, we all do it.
I've made excuses for people that have given me moments of joy all my life, and now as I've gotten older, I get mad at myself, and I try to figure out a way to right those wrongs. And those, you know what I mean? It's tough, man, because you start to realize. And the other thing is too, how do you evaluate? This is a different conversation altogether. But how do you evaluate people when they've tried to change things in their lives as well? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Even though that's a totally different conversation.
Like when people try to like recognize their own flaws and try to redeem themselves in terms of like trying to be a better person, or is it for the aspect of just trying to get back in good with the people who have abandoned them? Which is
right.
You are right, a whole other discussion. But I feel like that's the main thing that separates it, which is like whether or not the change of opinion is genuine or not. But then again, how do we judge that? How do we view that as truth or not in this where we live right now? Where again, similar to the movie, what's real and what's not can kind of be. It's a bit weird to tell sometimes because of social media and because of all these other aspects. Though social media is not in this movie, I just mean more of the way of where the illusion of reality and fiction kind of split. But if we we're going to keep talking about this because this is the entire movie. But we should also talk about some certain other aspects of the movie that really do make it work, which is, we mentioned earlier, the Lovecraft influences, because there are a lot. I mean, the movie itself is very named after and very, very loosely, I believe, based off of At the Mountains of Madness by Lovecraft. Jared, you're our resident Lovecraft expert-ish.
Yes, ish.
Yeah.
I've read At the Mountains of Madness is a phenomenal short story. But yeah, it's not related in like any like specific sense. Like there's not a story that it's based off of. Just the general vibe of especially like a small northeastern United States town where the people are weird and like half fish
Mm-hmm.
and that stuff, and like the black Byzantine church, the use of religious imagery, like the inversion of religious imagery, all very, very Lovecraftian. Again, not an adaptation by any means, but
more
a
of the
directly
salute,
inspired.
a nod.
Oh, absolutely.
An
Like the
homage.
creatures coming from the black Stygian abyss.
Not
That passage, when he's looking into the abyss and she's like reading from the book, describing what he's seeing, like that literally could have been ripped from a Lovecraft novel, the way it's written. It's great.
Go ahead, KP.
I just said a nod and a wink.
Yeah. There's also one other person that I mentioned a little earlier and danced around, which is the other person that this is very clearly a reference to, which is Stephen King.
Oh yeah.
You want to talk about because Daddy mentioned these kids who are running around and this dog barking, like, oh gee, I love Children of the Corn and Cujo. And
give you a cornfield shot.
Yes, they do. They give you that. They give you everything, and it's supposed to be an amalgamation of these horror writers. So very clearly, it's a direct because of the idea of the elder gods and using that it's Lovecraft, but it's kind of modernizing it through the lens of Stephen King, at least modern in terms of the '90s. So it is a really interesting way in which they're able to tackle those Lovecraftian themes throughout the movie in terms of like the idea of feeling lesser and whatnot. In fact, it even starts off like a Lovecraftian thing where you, Sam Neill's character John is telling the story of how he went insane to a psychiatrist in a mental institution while he's drawing crosses all across the room, which is that is from Mouth of Madness, right? Or Mountains of Madness that did that, where the dude is saying like, I'm about to enter the mountain of blah 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 blah. It's been a hot minute, so.
Well, yeah, usually Lovecraft things, a common trope in them is that he's like writing it after the fact, and he is describing it usually in some kind of letter.
Right. Okay.
Or to just the general public or to a specific person describing what happened. So yeah, very, very much similar.
Absolutely. Also want to point out in this one, much like Halloween that we mentioned in the previous episode, this music is once again by John Carpenter. And it shreds, dudes. Shout out to the main theme and the theme that plays to the credits. It's like way better than I thought it would be. It's such a heavy guitar. It just sounds like a rock anthem. It's so rad. It's rad. Ray did not see it, unfortunately. But did you stick around to see the credits?
I did see the ending. Don't worry. The reason I didn't see it was that I missed the first 10 minutes, and it did seem like one of those movies that if you miss a single second, you will not get anything.
That is true, in a way. But what do you think of the music? Because you are a resident music expert.
Guitar solos at the end.
I think, yeah, I remember. I didn't watch the movie, but it did sound awesome. Like,
I will tell you this.
Like it's also very unique to just.
I'll tell you this: he didn't have his headphones on, right? And he's walking around the kitchen doing a guitar solo without a guitar.
No, I'm not.
He was there guitarring it.
That's a lie.
That's not a lie.
That is a correct lie.
Now,
I did have my headphones on.
We have entered a thing where we are now being told truth, a fact, and fiction, and we cannot figure out which one is real.
Fiction is fact.
Which one is maybe the real Mountain Madness? Or the air guitars we shredded along the way?
I like the shredding at the end.
I didn't.
I'm always up for some shredding.
Yeah, like it's just so, again, it's something for like something that's like very much the cerebral take on fiction and horror, and also is very dark in terms of what it talks about, and yet it shreds, and yet we have this rock anthem. And even though it does go into dark territory, the movie also, much like we discussed this in previous episodes in regards to John Carpenter's work, it's pretty funny.
Oh, it's just a blast to watch.
It's just, the movie knows exactly what it is and just has a good time with it. And John Trent has a really funny scenes here and there, with just where he's like talking to into the girl in the car when she just goes through the abyss to make it to the place where Sutter Kane is, and he just wakes up like, so are we there yet? And then she just, like, after seeing all of hell, slowly turns to him, her eye twitching, is just, you're driving now.
Stuff like that. Like it's what sets John Carpenter's stuff apart is it's just enjoyable to watch. You can do deeper reading into the meaning of it, and whether intended or not. But at the end of the day, dude, he loaded up this movie. It's just going to be a fun time.
And the funny stuff too is they bother to show you in the first scene of the movie, or maybe it's not the first scene, but they bother to show you how good your protagonist is at his job, at being an insurance guy, right? Mm-hmm. And at finding the bad in people. But also, you see the conversation with the guy he works for, where the guy's trying to get him to work for him. You start to realize as well, there's already some darkness in your protagonist, right? And then as we go further into it, what makes him good at his job is his unwillingness to think that any of this can be anything other than a setup by somebody trying to scam. And so watching him as everything around him proves that this is legitimate, try to hold on to little threads of reality and deny all that's around him constantly. Even just, there's this whole slew of people walking towards him with fire and hatchets and shovels and bats, and they're coming towards him. He just walks into the bar to get away from it, right? And the guy in there blows his head off. And again, he's not willing to admit that this isn't real.
Because it can't be, because he's trying to like hold on to what little sanity he has left. Again, kind of similar to much of Lovecraft's work.
Well, and that's also part of us making excuses for people, right?
Yeah.
Is that we find ourselves in our beliefs in the people we put faith in, and if we let go of that, we're not ourselves anymore. Right? And that's what he's struggling with. Is what makes him who he is, the fact that he can always get to the heart of the matter, and the heart of the matter can't be evil has overcome the world and these people are turning into creatures.
It can't be the fact that it can't be that all this other stuff's happening. There has to be a method behind the madness and stuff, but sometimes there isn't.
Right.
I think that is a beautiful reading, I think, of the movie. We should also mention very briefly that the acting also, as we've kind of alluded to, due to the comedy, is 10 out of 10, fantastic. Charlton Heston makes a cameo for a little bit, which is, I got that. I'm sure, Kev, did you get a kick when you just saw Charlton Heston just show up in a movie and just for 5 minutes, but still, it's just a fun little bit.
That guy can read the dictionary, and I find it intriguing. His voice is so great,
Good. But we also have Sam Neill returning from Jurassic Park to play our main protagonist. Then we had Julie Carmen and Jordan Pronchow playing is a foreign name, and I cannot pronounce it. I'm sorry. For playing Sutter Kane, the author, who Jordan really nails the whole.
Oh, he's perfect.
They're both.
Aspect. Him and Sam are both great. Back and forth as well when they have time together.
They are so good. They make the whole movie.
As well, so does Julie Carmen. Let's not forget her role in the movie as well, which is
absolutely.
She's basically the one who's playing a little bit of the straight man to Sam Neill's ultra straight man and the craziness of the world. It's the point where it feels like she's the only one who's genuinely sane at a point, because she knows what's actually happening and she's the one trying to get out of Dodge, but then she slowly gets taken over.
She's kind of his conduit into all of this.
Absolutely. Now, there is another thing I want to talk about in the movie, because we talked about a lot of things in this movie, but I do want to ask you guys about the ending, because the ending, what happens is after everything is said and done, Sutter Kane's book is released into the world, and the Elder Gods wreak havoc and drive people to madness, and the world is overtaken by the movie of In the Mouth of Madness. And when everyone gone, there are pieces of book paper strewn across all of the world, and he's just the only man left, and he walks into a theater that's playing In the Mouth of Madness, directed also by John Carpenter in this in the movie, and he watches it with a little bottle of bag of popcorn, and he just laughs as he watches everything in his life go terribly again, and just laughs and laughs and laughs, and that's the very final bit of the movie. What do we think about that? Because that is the movie itself is complicated, but that ending is also just, if you want to talk about madness, that is insane. Throw it over to Jared first.
I did want to make an overall statement about the movie and about a lot of the strengths of what I think Lovecraft's work and, Lovecraft inspired, Lovecraft adjacent work like this also manages to emulate. Mm-hmm. Is that Lovecraft preys a lot on the fear that the powers that control us are too large and unfathomable to really wrap your mind around. And when you think of the real world equivalent to that, society as a whole he is kind of that unnameable, undescribable mass that has so much power, but you can't really quite wrap your head around it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like Lovecraft's work preys on the idea that like when you get exposed to the world at large, that there will be things that you just can't really understand due to just the scale of them. And there's so much out there that is like you look up at the cosmos and you feel tiny, and in the same kind of way you can look up at the goings on in the world and feel the exact same way, where you feel like you have no power over it, where you are just insignificant and tiny comparatively to uh, these governments, these cultures, these overarching things. Like it can feel very overwhelming, and I feel like this movie also manages to play along those lines with the whole like cultural shift happening with Sutter Kane's stuff. Where it's just like if you don't get it and you're not part of it, it can seem weird and culty and like otherworldly. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the ending plays perfectly into that, where it's just like he has no choice but to just lose his mind.
Oh, that's fantastic. I like that. KP, what did you think of the ending?
Would I be wrong to say that he found comfort in the fact that it wasn't just him that got?
Absolutely.
I think that's why he's laughing at the end and not shrieking in terror. Is not only because he's joining the cult itself, but he's also just kind of feels like at least I'm not alone.
Yeah, he submitted.
Yeah,
he fought as long as he could, and he's tapped out. Okay, fine, it's true, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And society, all of society, taking over the world through something like that gives him a form of comfort because he can be in the midst of the madness and be okay with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like that is everything we can really talk about the movie. So before we decide on what version of a classic this would be, Jared, did you want to step up on your soapbox, or do you want me to tackle it? I'll leave it up to you.
I just want to say it's a fun time. It's just a blast. It's something I'm probably going to watch like once a year or something, just because I enjoy it so much. The vibe is good, the acting is good, the practical effects and music are cool. It's just a blast. If you're interested in John Carpenter stuff at all, or you know you like Lovecraft stuff, or you just like stories that are like really meta, like give it a shout out.
Yeah, this with New Nightmare definitely just like if you want some meta horror, accept no substitute than these two. Like, oof. Well,
They're just so fun.
they're fun. But something I'm going to say about In the Mouth of Madness was as I kind of step on a little bit of a small soapbox is the fact that while it is definitely a fun time and a breezy time that you can have, much like all of anything that you can watch from John Carpenter's work, which is what makes them so accessible, which makes them so enjoyable, was what gives them the staying power, as we discussed with Halloween. What I think separates In the Mouth of Madness from his other work is the fact that I believe it's underrated in the way that it has been able to speak to something that we are still dealing with today, which is not only like if you want to look at like fandoms and whatnot, but the idea of the cult of personality and how, as Jared put it so eloquently, the idea that there are aspects of society and of people who garner this cult of personality that seem so beyond us that they can. It seems incomprehensible that it could happen. It doesn't seem possible that someone could get away with doing this or that, with someone being so obsessed with the work that they would be willing to believe it's real or at least do something in the real world to physically like threaten someone to like a terrible degree. It shows, I think, more than anything else, kind of how we act in response to work, but also just in terms of trying to make sure that we understand that reality is important to invest in more so than sometimes fantasy can be. And I feel like that's what gives it a lot of the story's oomph. And again, it just works out very well. And I feel like we've kind of hit all the points I kind of wanted to hit. So I'm going to step off the soapbox. Admittedly, not my greatest final speech, but again, I feel like we've all kind of had such interesting things to say. I feel like we'll just be repeating ourselves. So, I guess we're gonna throw it over to. Sorry, someone say something.
Well, it encapsulates the problems you have in middle school and the problems you have globally.
Mm-hmm.
Wanting to join that club.
Wanting
You know what I mean?
Yeah, get in with the in crowd. Get in with something that I guess like can give you that aspect. Like if it becomes a part of your personality and the dangers of that, of being
And how
obsessed
hard
for
it is
work.
to resist all of that.
That is true. It is.
As,
Mm-hmm.
as popularity grows, it becomes hard to say, I'm not a part of it.
Absolutely. So I'm gonna throw my hat in the ring and call this an underrated classic on our list. Um, the question of it being a definitive classic, I'm gonna leave up to you guys, but I think it's definitely underrated.
It's really good for me having like never actually heard of it in
Mhm.
comparison to like John Carpenter's other work like Halloween or The Thing. Um, it's really good. Like you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, no.
The fact that
Sometimes
people
like
don't talk about it is somewhat surprising.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's slipped under people's radar. It's the his one. It's like John Carpenter has such a very large body of work that is just so good that the fact that this one slipped under the radar honestly is not surprising, again considering what else he's made, but also it is still surprising that nobody's at least come back around to talk about it, in my opinion anyway.
Agreed.
KP, did you want to throw your hat into whether
I
you
just
oh you disagree? Okay,
I
would we call this a
agree
cult
with
classic if only because of the definition of cult?
Yes.
I was gonna say cult classic. I was.
All right. Well, I feel like that is going to do it for this episode. Um, Next time we're going to be talking is actually I'm not going to be presenting it. JP.
I'll take it.
No, I was going to say Jared and Justin are not presenting, but KP is. I spoiled that for you guys. He's going to be presenting Dead Presidents next week. We're going to be taking a step away from horror for hopefully a little bit longer because we kind of hit it a lot recently. We're going to go into a whole other realm over here. Want to give us any shout outs about the movie before we get into that? Like, things get us
Would
ready
you like
for?
to talk about? Oh, it is the story of a group of inner city guys coming back from the war, and the plight of the man coming back from the war has been told quite a bit. This version of it is kind of an action movie version of it, but it's also set in the urban communities. And you can't find the job. You've been trained to do things that aren't really accepted.
Mm-hmm.
And how that the people that and loved, you left when you were a teenager, and you come back and you've been to war, and they've changed, you've changed, and what has changed you're never going to be able to get away from that. You know what I mean? And how that snowballs into a really bad decision that turns into something else, and we'll get into it all later. And the soundtrack's off the chain.
All right, that sounds like some good stuff to look forward to. So once again, from our team over here at IIRC, this has been Litnick, John Wick, Jared, Cobra Kai, KP, Sweep the Leg, and of course Raiders of the Lost Ark. This has been a Go Home production 2020. Once again, telling you to go out there, find some good content. You'll never know whether you'll find the next classic. Say goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye.
And cut.
Goodbye.